Wonderful to be doing this between 5 and 6 this morning. We're also joined now by independent political analyst Dale McKinley. Great to have you, Dale. Welcome.
Thanks, Leanne.
So what do you make so far? I mean, I know we're early days, but how is this going according to what your predictions were?
I think it's going more or less according to what I thought. And the larger story, of course, besides, I don't think we can really say where things are going to end up exactly because it's way too early. But I think the larger story, which has clearly been coming in, is this issue of low voter turnout. But I just wanted to make the point, there has been a trend over the last 5 local government elections starting all the way back in 1995. If you look at the trend, it is gradually, except for around 2000, I think it was the 2011 or 12 one, there was a little bit of a bump up. But mostly it's been a downward trend. And in some ways it doesn't surprise me, because if you think about this, as our elections have taken place, people have gotten more and more, how should we say, angry, a little bit more desperate around socioeconomic service delivery issues, and have pulled out. The largest vote in the last 3 local government elections has been the no vote. Yeah. And that's quite something.
There has been almost plans to not vote. Communities have said, until we get our services, we're not going to vote. Do political parties take that to heart? Or is it, well, it doesn't matter, they didn't vote, we care about the numbers on the board? I
think most political parties have just basically fobbed it off. I think they've assumed, and I think this is a wake-up call. This election is a wake-up call, especially for the ANC, because it has taken the vote for granted. It's basically said, well, it really doesn't really matter. We're still going to win. I mean, even last night, I think some of the ANC officials were still punting that line. It's understandable that they were doing so. But I think the parties, we really need to have a much more sort of, I think, mature politics with political parties. They have taken the people for granted, and people are now saying, hey, if you're going to take us for granted, we're going to pull out of this process. And that already begins to bring in the legitimacy of the election in terms of the mandate that's given to the parties that then come victorious.
I mean, if we look at the voter turnout, because I mean, that is the story that we were looking at yesterday. And I mean, when we spoke to the numbers that were being released at like 5 o'clock saying about 8 million voters had gone out, we're still waiting for that official numbers to see how many South Africans did go out. But just predictions, as the CSIR were telling us, that we were looking at about a 47% voter turnout of the registered voters. So, you know, that's also a big picture with only a small amount that are registered, and then of those, only 47% of them going out and voting.
And then, Leanne, if you take it into another level, if you look at eligible voters, so you've got registered voters, and then you've got eligible voters. We have over 14 million people in this country who didn't even bother to register. And if you take those 14 million with the ones who didn't vote, it's the majority of the electorate. So essentially what we have is a mandate, 47% of the registered voters, and if you say the ANC gets, let's say, 50% or somewhere in the 40s, that's a mandate of in the 20 percentile range.
Wow. Yeah.
It's not just South Africa, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Is this a sign of a maturing democracy, though?
I wouldn't say that. I think we should never celebrate low voter turnouts as something that's really a good thing. I think where it's always going to be, national elections are always going to draw more attention, and local government elections are always, but I think where we really need, I think our system is quite mature in a systemic way. I think what's immature are the political parties themselves. And this brings us to the notion of what we're going to face here after the end of the day today. When we look at this picture, there's going to be a lot of hung councils, there's going to be a lot of coalition politics, and the question is whether the political parties can come to the table and be mature and responsible enough to have the kind of political approach that is going to allow them to govern and put the people first as opposed to the parties first. This is the second story for me in these elections, besides the low voter turnout, is whether the political parties themselves are going to get beyond themselves and start actually responding to the electorate and not take them for granted.
Right, I want to cross back to KwaZulu-Natal now, and this, of course, is where Jade Pauls is. We were having a report from her a bit earlier, but unfortunately something happened with a connection.